Dr. Elena Vasquez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stared at the computer screen. For the 100th time that day, the coffee in her mug had gone cold hours ago. But she didn't care. Something incredible was happening, and she couldn't look away. For 3 months, she had been working on this mysterious signal that came from somewhere near the Andromeda Galaxy. At first, her colleagues at the research center thought it was just space noise. But Elena knew better. She had spent years studying signals from deep space, and this one was different. It had patterns, rhythms, almost like someone was trying to talk. Still working on that alien radio show, her friend Diego joked as he walked past her desk. Elena barely looked up. She was too busy watching the numbers and symbols dancing across her screen. The breakthrough came at 2:47 in the morning on a rainy Tuesday. Elena had been alone in the lab, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and energy drink cans. Suddenly, the jumbled mess of signals started making sense. It wasn't random at all. It was a document. A very important document. Her hands shook as she printed out the translation. The words were impossible, but there they were in black and white. Someone, or something, had left her a massive inheritance. Not money or a house, but entire planets. 3 of them, plus a fleet of ships and something called a seat on the Galactic Council. Elena laughed out loud, the sound echoing in the empty lab. This had to be a joke. Maybe her co-workers were playing an elaborate prank on her. But as she read through the document again and again, the technical details were too complex, too consistent to be fake. Meanwhile, billions of miles away, something very different was happening. In a palace made of living crystal that grew from the surface of a purple moon, 3 sisters were having the worst day of their lives. Princess Lyrale paced back and forth, her blue skin shimmering with anger. Her wings, which normally glowed like starlight, were dim and twitching with frustration. "Tell me again," she said to the nervous messenger standing before them. "Tell me exactly what Aunt Zarthea did." The messenger, a small creature that looked like a cross between a butterfly and a dolphin, cleared his throat. "Your aunt has left her entire estate to a being called Elena Vasquez. She lives on the 3rd planet of the Sol system. Princess Vexandra, the middle sister, slammed her fist on the table. The impact sent ripples of light through the crystal. "Surface Earth," she snarled. "That backwater mudball where they still burn dead plants for energy?" The youngest sister, Princess Quinara, was trying not to laugh. But the situation was so ridiculous that she couldn't help herself. Soon, all 3 sisters were laughing, their voices creating a beautiful harmony that made the crystal walls sing in response. "This is perfect," Lyrale said, wiping tears from her eyes. Aunt Zarthea always had a strange sense of humor, but this tops everything. She gave her inheritance to a human. Vexandra was still chuckling. "Do you remember what we learned about them in school? They've only had technology for a few hundred years. They fight wars over imaginary lines on maps. Half of them still believe they're the only intelligent life in the universe. And now one of them owns 3 planets and gets to sit with the Galactic Council," Quinara added, which sent them into another fit of laughter. But as the laughter died down, reality began to sink in. This wasn't just funny, it was a disaster. The 3 sisters had been competing for their aunt's inheritance their whole lives. Princess Zarthea had been the richest and most powerful member of their family. Her planets were paradise worlds. Her ships were the fastest in the galaxy, and her seat on the Galactic Council could influence the fate of billions. "We have to fix this," Lyrale said, her voice growing serious. "There's obviously been a mistake, some computer error, maybe. Or perhaps Aunt Zarthea was sick when she made this decision. It doesn't matter why." Vexandra replied, "What matters is getting our inheritance back from some primitive human who probably doesn't even know what she's been given." The sisters called for their family's most trusted advisor, Keeper Thane. He was an ancient being who had served their family for over 1,000 years. His wisdom was legendary, but even he seemed confused by the situation. "I'm afraid there's no mistake," Thane said softly. Princess Zarthea was very specific. She spent decades studying Earth and its inhabitants. She was particularly interested in this Elena Vasquez. Why? All three sisters asked at once. Thane pulled up a holographic display showing Earth from space. Your aunt believed that sometimes the most unexpected choices lead to the greatest outcomes. She saw something in this human that impressed her. What could possibly impress her about a human? Lyrale asked. I suppose we'll have to ask Dr. Vasquez herself, Thane replied. Back on Earth, Elena was having a very strange week ever since. She decoded the signal. Weird things kept happening. Her coffee maker had started working perfectly after being broken for months. Her car, which usually made terrible noises, was running like new. Even her apartment plants, which she constantly killed, were suddenly green and healthy. She was starting to wonder if she was losing her mind when something impossible happened. Elena was working late again, trying to make sense of more signals from the same source when the air in front of her desk began to shimmer. At first, she thought it was just tiredness making her eyes play tricks. But the shimmer grew brighter and more solid until it formed a perfect circle of light. Hovering 3 feet off the ground, she grabbed her phone to record what was happening. But the device wouldn't work, neither would her computer or any other electronic equipment in the room. Everything had simply stopped working. A figure stepped through the circle of light, and Elena's jaw dropped. The being in front of her looked almost human, but with skin that shifted between silver and gold. Eyes that held tiny stars, and a presence that made the air itself feel alive. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the being said in perfect English, though its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. I'm Keeper Thane, representative of the Zephyrian Empire. I bring greetings from the Galactic Council and news that will change your life forever. Elena tried to speak, but only managed to make a small squeaking sound. Thane smiled kindly. I know this is overwhelming. Perhaps you should sit down. We have much to discuss, and 3 very curious princesses are eager to meet. The human who has inherited their aunt's legacy. As Elena sank into her chair, her mind raced with a million questions. But the biggest question of all was simple. What had she gotten herself into? The portal behind Thane shimmered with new activity. Elena realized that her quiet life as a scientist was about to become anything but quiet. Somewhere out there, 3 alien princesses were probably still laughing at the idea of a human inheriting their aunt's fortune. They had no idea that their laughter was about to turn into something very different indeed. Elena stared at Keeper Thane for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few seconds. Her brain was trying to process everything she was seeing, but it felt like trying to drink from a fire hose. The being in front of her was clearly not human. The portal behind him was definitely not normal. And apparently she owned 3 planets now. This has to be a dream, she whispered to herself. I fell asleep at my desk again. Thane chuckled, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I understand your confusion, Dr. Vasquez. Perhaps this will help. He waved his hand. And suddenly the air filled with images made of light. Elena gasped as she saw 3 beautiful worlds spinning slowly in front of her. The first planet was covered in purple oceans and silver beaches. Floating cities drifted lazily through pink clouds. The second world looked like a giant garden, with forests of crystal trees and waterfalls that flowed upward into the sky. The third planet was the most amazing of all. It seemed to be made entirely of living coral that glowed with soft rainbow colors. These are yours now, Thane explained. Princess Zarthea spent centuries terraforming them. Each world is home to millions of beings who have lived peacefully for generations. Elena felt dizzy. But why me? I'm just a scientist. I study radio signals from space. I can barely keep my houseplants alive. Princess Zarthea saw something special in humanity, Thane replied. She studied your species for decades. She was fascinated by how humans never give up, even when things seem impossible. She particularly admired your work. Before Elena could ask more questions, the portal flared with new light. 3 figures stepped through, and Elena's mouth fell open again. The alien princesses were even more incredible in person than she could have imagined. Princess Lyrale moved like a dancer, her long silver hair floating around her as if she were underwater. Her skin had a blue tint that shifted and changed, like the surface of a calm lake. But it was her eyes that caught Elena's attention. They held the depth of ancient wisdom, mixed with barely controlled irritation. Princess Vexandra was clearly the warrior of the group. She was taller than her sisters, with sharp features and skin that glowed like polished copper. Her movements were quick and precise, like a cat ready to pounce. She looked around Elena's lab with obvious disgust. Princess Quinara was the youngest, and Elena could see curiosity in her bright green eyes. Unlike her sisters, she seemed genuinely interested in the human technologies scattered around the lab. She walked over to Elena's microscope and examined it with fascination. "So you're the human," Lyrale said, her voice carrying the tone of someone who had just discovered something unpleasant. On the bottom of her shoe, "You're smaller than I expected." Elena stood up straighter. She might be confused and overwhelmed, but she wasn't going to be talked down to in her own lab. "And you're more rude than I expected for someone who's supposed to be royalty." Vexandra's eyes flashed with anger, but Quinara laughed, a sound like silver bells. "She has spirit, this one. I can see why Aunt Zarthia liked her." Aunt Zarthia was clearly having some kind of mental breakdown. Vexandra snapped, "No offense to your species, human, but you're not exactly Galactic Council material." Elena felt her temper rising. She had spent her whole career being underestimated because she was young, because she was a woman, because she asked too many questions. She wasn't about to start taking it from alien princesses too. "Maybe not," she said calmly, "but I'm smart enough to decode your aunt's message when your entire galactic civilization couldn't figure out how to contact me properly." The three sisters exchanged glances. Lyrale raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Elena walked over to her computer, which had started working again now that Thane had closed the portal. "Your inheritance signal was encrypted with a mathematical sequence based on prime numbers, but it used a base 12 counting system instead of our base 10. Most of our computers gave up trying to decode it because they couldn't adapt to the different mathematical framework." She pulled up her work on the screen. "But I realized that if I adjusted for the different number system and cross-reference it with patterns I'd seen in pulsar signals, I could break the code. It took me 3 months of 18-hour days, but I figured it out." Vexandra looked at the screen full of equations and symbols. Despite herself, she seemed impressed. "You did this alone?" "Well, I had a lot of coffee," Elena said with a small smile. Quinara was now examining Elena's collection of rock samples from Mars. "These are from the 4th planet in your system, aren't they? How did you get them?" "We sent robots there to collect samples," Elena explained. "It's too dangerous for humans to go there yet, but we're working on it." "Robots?" Lyrale asked. "You mean artificial intelligence?" "Not really intelligent," Elena said. "More like very sophisticated remote-controlled vehicles. We guide them from here, and they send back pictures and samples." The princesses looked at each other with surprise. They had expected to find a primitive creature who barely understood fire, not someone who was already exploring other worlds. Vexandra decided to test Elena further. She pulled out a small device that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a seashell. "Can you figure out how this works?" Elena took the device carefully. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. She held it up to the light and noticed that it was partially transparent inside. She could see what looked like tiny pathways of light flowing like rivers. "It's biological," she said after a moment, "like a computer, but grown instead of built. The light pathways are probably how information flows through it. And this pulse I'm feeling, it's sensing with my heartbeat, isn't it? It's reading my biological signals." She looked up at Vexandra. "It's incredibly advanced. We have nothing like this on Earth. But the basic principle is similar to how neurons work in a brain. Information flowing through connected pathways." Vexandra stared at Elena in shock. It had taken her years of training to understand bioneural technology, and this human had grasped the basics in minutes. "Your neural networks could be more efficient though," Elena continued, studying the device more closely. "On Earth, we have these tiny organisms called bacteria that can process information incredibly fast. If you combine their processing speed with your bio-neural pathways, you could probably increase the device's capabilities by about 30%. Thane smiled knowingly. Now the princesses were beginning to see what their aunt had seen. Quinara was the first to speak. You're not what we expected. Neither are you, Eleanor replied honestly. I thought if I ever met aliens, they'd either be trying to destroy Earth or study us like lab rats. I never imagined I'd inherit a cosmic empire from one. Lyrale was quiet for a long moment, studying Eleanor with new interest. The inheritance comes with responsibilities, she said finally. Those 3 worlds I showed you, they're not just pretty places. Billions of beings live there. They depend on wise leadership to keep their civilizations running smoothly. Eleanor felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders. I know. That's what scares me the most. I don't know anything about running a planet, let alone 3 of them. That's why we're here. Quinara said gently, Aunt Sarthea might have left everything to you, but we grew up in this world. We understand galactic politics and interspecies relations. You're offering to help me? Eleanor asked, surprised. The 3 sisters looked at each other. They had come here expecting to find a simple creature they could easily intimidate into giving up the inheritance. Instead, they had found someone who challenged their assumptions and made them think in new ways. Maybe, Lyrale said carefully, but first, you have to prove you're worthy of what you've inherited. The Galactic Council won't just take our word for it that a human can handle this kind of responsibility. Eleanor nodded. She had expected as much. What do I have to do? Vexandra smiled for the first time since arriving. 3 trials. Traditional tests that have been used for centuries to determine if someone is fit to lead. And if I fail, then you go back to your quiet life studying radio signals, Lyrale said, and we'll take over managing the inheritance as your advisors. Eleanor looked around her lab, at her familiar equipment, her comfortable chair, her peaceful routine. Then, she looked at the holographic images of the 3 beautiful worlds still floating in the air. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were living their lives, unaware that their fate now rested in the hands of a human scientist from Earth. When do we start? She asked. The princesses smiled. Maybe this human was going to be more interesting than they had thought. Eleanor packed her small travel bag with shaking hands. How do you prepare for alien trials on other worlds? She threw in some energy bars, her lucky pen, and a photo of her grandmother who had always told her she could do anything if she put her mind to it. The journey to the first trial location took 3 days through hyperspace. Eleanor spent most of the time staring out the ship's window in amazement. Space wasn't the cold, empty darkness she had imagined. It was alive with colors and energy streams that danced between the stars like cosmic rivers. Nervous, Quinara asked, sitting down beside her. Terrified, Eleanor admitted. What if I mess this up? What if I make decisions that hurt people? Then you'll learn from your mistakes and do better next time, Quinara replied. That's what good leaders do. When they arrived at Kepler 4 for to be Eleanor's first inherited world, she was speechless. The planet was even more beautiful in person than in the holograms. Purple oceans stretched to the horizon, and floating cities drifted through pink clouds like dreams made real. But something was wrong. As their ship landed, Eleanor could see crowds of beings gathered in angry groups. The floating cities had stopped moving and were hovering dangerously close to each other. The peaceful world Thane had described was on the edge of chaos. The Zephyrians and the Aquari have been fighting for months, Lyrale explained as they walked toward the crowd. Both species need the same rare crystals to power their cities, but there aren't enough crystals for everyone. Eleanor looked at the 2 groups facing each other. The Zephyrians looked like tall, graceful birds with shimmering feathers and wise eyes. The Aquari resembled dolphins that had learned to walk on land, with smooth skin that changed colors based on their emotions. Right now, both groups were showing colors that Eleanor guessed meant anger and fear. What have they tried so far? Eleanor asked. Vexandra snorted. Everything. Dividing the crystals equally, taking turns mining them, even drawing lots to see who gets what. Nothing works because there simply aren't enough crystals. Eleanor walked closer to examine the crystal formations jutting out of the ground. They glowed with soft blue light and hummed with energy. She knelt down and touched one carefully. It felt warm and seemed to pulse with life. These aren't just power sources, she realized. They're alive, aren't they? The Zephyrian leader, an elderly female with golden feathers, stepped forward. You are the new inheritor. You're very small. Size doesn't matter when you're trying to solve problems, Eleanor replied. Tell me, do these crystals grow very slowly? The Aquari leader answered, his skin shifting to a cautious orange color. Maybe a few inches every 100 years. Eleanor spent the next hour asking questions, examining the crystals, and studying the layout of the floating cities. The princesses watched her work, expecting her to make the same mistakes every other mediator had made. But Eleanor wasn't thinking. Like a typical leader. I have an idea, she finally announced, but it's going to sound crazy. She gathered both groups around her. On Earth, we have plants that need sunlight to survive, but we also have plants that grow in caves. In complete darkness, they get their energy differently. The crowd looked confused. Eleanor continued, your crystals feed on the planet's magnetic field, right? That's why they grow so slowly. They're only getting a trickle of energy. But what if we could give them more food? She pointed to the floating cities. Your cities generate electromagnetic fields to stay in the air. Instead of seeing that energy is separate from the crystals, what if we connected them? Let the crystals feed on the excess energy from your cities. The Zephyrian leader tilted her head. You're suggesting we farm the crystals? Exactly. And here's the best part. Zephyrian cities generate one type of electromagnetic field, and Aquari cities generate a different type. If you position your cities to create a network around the crystal formations, you could boost their growth by thousands of times. The Aquari leader's skin shifted to a hopeful green. But that would require us to coordinate our city movements perfectly, which means you'd have to work together, Eleanor said with a smile. Share information, plan routes together, maybe even share some living spaces, instead of competing for resources. You'd be creating them together. The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the two leaders began to smile. Within hours, both species were working side by side to reposition their cities. Eleanor watched from the ground as the floating cities moved into a complex pattern above the crystal fields. When the last city reached its position, something magical happened. The crystals began to glow brighter, then brighter still, within minutes. Eleanor could see new crystal formations, sprouting from the ground like fast-growing plants. The energy field created by the cooperating cities was feeding the crystals exactly what they needed to thrive. Incredible, Quinara whispered. She turned a resource problem into a cooperation solution. The second trial took place in the void between stars. Eleanor found herself on the bridge of a Zephyrian bioship, facing a cosmic storm that stretched across thousands of miles. The storm crackled with energy that could tear apart any ship that entered it. Traditional navigation systems don't work in the storm, Vexandra explained. You have to rely on instinct and basic instruments. Many experienced pilots have been lost trying to navigate through it. Eleanor studied the swirling patterns of energy through the ship's viewing screen. The storm looked chaotic and random, but she had spent years studying patterns and radio signals from space. She knew that even the most complex systems usually had underlying rhythms. It's like a hurricane, she said to herself. But in 3 dimensions, on Earth, Eleanor had studied weather patterns extensively. Hurricanes looked random from the outside, but they followed predictable rules. Warm air rises, cool air sinks, and the whole system rotates based on the planet's spin. Can you show me the energy readings from the storm? She asked. The ship's instruments displayed waves of data that looked like chaos to the princesses. But Eleanor saw something else, patterns within patterns, like a song with multiple melodies playing at the same time. There, she pointed to a section of the data. The storm has a rhythm. It's not random at all. It's rotating in sections, like gears in a machine. If we time our movements to match the rotation, we can ride the energy currents instead of fighting them. She took control of the ship's navigation system. Instead of trying to power through the storm, she guided the ship along the natural energy flows. When the reading showed a current moving in their direction, she accelerated with it. When the energy shifted, she adjusted their course to match. The princesses watched in amazement as Elena surfed the cosmic storm. Like a dolphin riding ocean waves, what should have been a terrifying battle became an elegant dance between the ship and the forces of space. They emerged from the storm safely, but more importantly, they had traveled through it faster than anyone had ever managed before. "How did you know to do that?" Lyrale asked. "I didn't know," Elena admitted. "I just trusted that the universe has patterns, even when we can't see them at first. Sometimes the best way through a problem is to work with it instead of against it." The third and final trial was the most personal. Elena stood before the eternal flame, a column of living energy that seemed to see directly into her soul. The flame would judge whether she truly understood the responsibility of leadership. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this," Elena whispered. "No, one never is," Quinara said gently. "But being ready isn't the point. Being willing to try is." Elena stepped forward and placed her hand on the warm surface of the flame. Immediately, her mind filled with visions, memories from her childhood, dreams of her future, and most surprisingly, images of beings she had never met. She saw the Zephyrians and Aquari working together on her first world, their children playing in integrated schools they had built. She saw scientists from dozens of species sharing discoveries that could help everyone. She saw herself, older and wiser, making decisions that affected billions of lives. But the flame also showed her fears, the mistakes she would make, the people she might disappoint, the weight of responsibility that would never fully leave her shoulders. "I'm scared," she admitted to the flame. "I'm scared I'm not smart enough, not strong enough, not good enough for all of this." The flame pulsed with warmth, and Elena heard a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Fear is not weakness. Fear is wisdom. Only those who understand the weight of their choices can be trusted to make them wisely." The flame grew brighter, its light filling the chamber. Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest, and she knew she had passed the final trial. As she stepped back from the flame, she saw the three princesses watching her with expressions she had never seen before. It wasn't mockery or skepticism anymore. It was respect. "The trials are complete," Thane announced. "Elena Vasquez has proven herself worthy of her inheritance." But as Elena looked at the princesses who had become her guides and friends, she realized something important. The real test wasn't proving she could lead alone. It was learning that the best leaders never have to. Elena stood in the Grand Council chamber of her inherited space station, staring at the official documents that made her the legal owner of 3 worlds. The papers felt heavy in her hands, not because of their weight, but because of what they represented. Billions of lives now depended on her decisions. "So what happens now?" she asked, looking at the 3 princesses who had become so much more than she had ever expected. Lyrale stepped forward, her expression serious but kind. "Now you take control of your inheritance and rule as Princess Zarthia intended." Elena shook her head. "That's not how this is going to work." The princesses exchanged confused glances. "What do you mean?" Vexandra asked. "I mean I'm not going to rule anything," Elena said firmly. "I'm going to share it." She walked over to the holographic display showing her 3 worlds. "You 3 know these civilizations better than I ever will. You understand galactic politics, interspecies relations, and how to keep billions of beings happy and safe. I may have inherited these worlds, but you're the ones who should help run them." Quinara's eyes widened. "You want us to be your advisors." "I want you to be my partners," Elena corrected. "Equal partners. We make decisions together, we share responsibilities together, and we face whatever comes next together." The silence that followed was so complete that Elena could hear the hum of the station's life support systems. No ruler in galactic history had ever voluntarily shared power like this, especially not with people who had initially opposed them. Lyrale was the first to speak. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious," Elena replied. "I've learned more in the past few weeks than I did in years of studying space signals, and most of what I learned came from watching you 3 work together over the following months." Elena's decision proved to be brilliant. Raleigh became her guide through the complex world of galactic politics, teaching her which species were allies, which were neutral, and which might cause trouble. Elena discovered that interstellar diplomacy was a lot like managing competing research teams. Back on Earth, you had to listen to everyone, find common ground, and sometimes agree to disagree. Vexandra took charge of security and defense, but she also became Elena's protector in a more personal way. When other galactic leaders questioned whether a human could handle such responsibility, Vexandra would step forward with a list of Elena's accomplishments and a look that dared anyone to argue. The human solved a resource crisis that had been going on for decades, she would say proudly. She navigated a cosmic storm that has destroyed ships for centuries. And she did it all while being respectful to everyone she met. Can your leaders say the same? Quinara became Elena's closest friend and cultural teacher. She helped Elena understand the customs and traditions of dozens of different species. And in return, Elena shared stories about Earth that fascinated Quinara endlessly. Tell me again about snow, Quinara would say during their evening conversations. How can water become solid and fall from the sky? Elena would laugh and explain weather patterns, seasons, and the way Earth's climate worked. In return, Quinara taught her about the singing crystals of Zephyr Prime, the floating gardens of Aquarius space, and the 1,000 different ways that civilizations across the galaxy had learned to create beauty together. The four of them began making changes that amazed everyone. Elena introduced concepts from Earth's environmental science to help restore damaged ecosystems on mining worlds. The princesses shared Zephyrian technology that could clean polluted atmospheres in years. Instead of centuries, they created the first human Zephyrian research exchange, where Earth scientists could study advanced alien technology while alien researchers learned about human ingenuity and problem-solving methods. The results were incredible: new medical treatments, better energy systems, and technologies that neither species could have developed alone. Elena's favorite project was the Cultural Bridge program. She convinced dozens of species to share their art, music, and stories with each other. Soon, Zephyrian musicians were collaborating with Earth composers. Aquari poets were writing verses with human authors. And children across the galaxy were learning that differences could be beautiful instead of frightening. But their success was creating problems they hadn't expected. Elena first noticed something was wrong during a routine Galactic Council meeting. Representatives from several older civilizations were whispering among themselves and shooting dark looks in her direction. When she tried to participate in discussions, they would ignore her or change the subject. "What's going on?" she asked. Raleigh, after a particularly uncomfortable session, Liralei's expression was troubled. "There are rumors circulating. Some species think you're gaining too much influence too quickly. They're saying that humans are dangerous because you adapt and learn so fast." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "Dangerous how?" "They're afraid," Vexandra said bluntly, joining their conversation. "They've been the dominant powers in the galaxy for thousands of years. Now suddenly there's a new species that solves problems they couldn't solve, makes friends with enemies they couldn't reconcile, and does it all while making it look easy." The situation got worse when Elena discovered that a group of crystalline beings called the Vorthan Empire were actively working against her. They had been spreading lies about humans being aggressive and unpredictable. They claimed that giving any human a seat on the Galactic Council was like handing weapons to children. "They're planning something," Quinara reported after attending a diplomatic gathering. "I overheard them talking about removing you from power before you become a threat to galactic stability." Elena sat in her quarters that night, staring out at the stars and thinking about everything that had happened. Just months ago, she had been a simple scientist studying radio signals. Now she was at the center of galactic politics, and apparently some very powerful beings wanted her gone. "Maybe they're right," she said to the princesses who had come to check on her. "Maybe I'm moving too fast, changing too much. Maybe humans aren't ready for this kind of responsibility. Stop that," Vexandra said firmly. "Self-doubt is the enemy of good leadership. The Vorthans aren't afraid because you're dangerous," Raleigh added. "They're afraid because you're effective. You've shown that their old ways of doing things aren't the only ways, and that scares them. Quinara sat down beside Elena. Do you know what I think? I think they're also afraid because you make it look easy to work together. For centuries, they've maintained power by keeping species separated and suspicious of each other. But you've proven that cooperation creates better results than competition. Elena looked at her three friends, because that's what they had become, true friends, who supported each other through everything. So what do? We fight back, Vexandra said with a grin. But not the way they expect. What do you mean? Elena asked. Lyrale smiled. Instead of defending yourself against their accusations, why don't you prove them wrong in front of everyone? Show the entire galaxy what human leadership really looks like. Elena felt a spark of excitement. A demonstration. Better than that, Quinara said, her eyes lighting up. A galactic summit. Invite representatives from every species, every world, every civilization. Show them not what humans might do wrong, but what they can do right. Elena stood up, feeling energy flow back into her tired body. That's either the best idea you've ever had, or the worst, probably both, Vexandra laughed. But it's definitely going to be interesting. As Elena looked out at the stars again, she realized that the scared young scientist who had decoded that first alien message was gone. In her place was someone who had learned that the greatest challenges weren't technical problems to be solved alone, but opportunities to bring people together. The Vorthans wanted a fight, but Elena was going to give them something much more powerful. A chance to see what the galaxy could become when everyone worked together. She just hoped it would be enough to change their minds before they decided to change hers by force. The day of the Galactic Summit arrived faster than Elena had expected. As her ship approached Nexus Prime, she pressed her face against the viewing window and gasped. The neutral world at the galaxy's center was unlike anything she had ever seen. Nexus Prime looked like a giant crystal ball floating in space, its surface covered with impossible architecture that seemed to grow like living coral. Massive towers twisted up from the surface in spirals that defied physics, connected by bridges made of pure light. Ships from hundreds of different civilizations were arriving from every direction, creating a traffic pattern that looked like a three-dimensional spider web. Nervous, Quinara asked, sitting down beside her, terrified. Elena admitted, what if nobody listens? What if they've already made up their minds about humans? Then we change their minds, Vexandra said confidently. The same way you changed ours. Elena looked at her three friends and felt a warmth spread through her chest. Just months ago, these three had laughed at the idea of a human inheriting galactic responsibility. Now they were willing to stand with her against the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The summit hall was breathtaking. The ceiling was transparent, showing the swirling colors of the galactic core above them. Representatives from every known species filled the curved seating areas, creating a rainbow of different skin colors, body shapes, and clothing styles. Elena had never seen so much diversity in one place, but as she walked to the speaker's platform, she could feel the hostility in the room. Many of the representatives were whispering among themselves, and she caught fragments of conversations in languages she was still learning. Primitive species, too young for such responsibility. Dangerous precedent. The Vorthan Empire's representatives sat in the front row, their crystalline bodies reflecting the room's light in sharp, cold patterns. Their leader, Chancellor Zix, stood up as Elena approached the podium. Before this human speaks, Chancellor, Zix announced, his voice echoing like breaking glass. We must address the fundamental question, should any species be granted galactic authority before they have proven their maturity through centuries of peaceful development? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. Elena felt her heart sink. They were going to condemn humanity without even listening to what she had to say. But then Lyrale stood up. With respect, Chancellor Zix, perhaps we should judge species by their actions, not their age. Actions like what? Chancellor Zix challenged. What has this human accomplished except inherit wealth she did not earn? Elena took a deep breath and stepped forward. This was it. Everything she had worked for, everything she had learned, came down to this moment. You're right, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. I didn't earn my inheritance through conquest or centuries of development. I earned it because someone saw potential in humanity that you're refusing to see. She gestured, and holographic displays filled the air above the audience. The first image showed Kepler 442b, where the Zephyrians and Aquari were now working. Together, they're floating cities creating beautiful patterns around thriving crystal farms. 6 months ago, these two species were on the verge of war over limited resources. Today, they're creating abundance together, not through force or ancient wisdom, but through cooperation and new thinking. The next image showed Elena's second world. We're a different species. We're sharing technology and knowledge through the Cultural Bridge program. Here, scientists from 12 different civilizations are working together on problems that have puzzled individual species for generations. They've developed new medical treatments, better energy systems, and technologies that none of them could have created alone. But Elena's most powerful display was yet to come. The hologram showed Earth itself, spinning slowly in space. You call humanity primitive, Elena said, looking directly at Chancellor Zix. But let me tell you what humans do that I haven't seen anywhere else in the galaxy. We dream impossible dreams, and then we make them real. New images appeared, humans exploring space, diving to the deepest parts of Earth's oceans, creating art and music that move people to tears, building machines that could think, and always reaching for something just beyond their grasp. We've only had technology for a few hundred years, but in that time we've gone from not knowing other planets existed to standing here among you. We've made mistakes, yes, we've fought wars and damaged our world, but we learn from every mistake, and we never stop trying to do better. Elena paused, letting her words sink in. When she continued, her voice was softer, but somehow more powerful. Princess Dorothea didn't choose me because humans are perfect. She chose me because we're not perfect, but we're always trying to become better. And she knew that's exactly what the galaxy needs right now. The hall was completely silent. Elena could see some representatives leaning forward, genuinely listening for the first time. You're afraid of change, Elena continued, looking around the room. You've built a stable galaxy by keeping species separate, by maintaining the same power structures for thousands of years. But stability isn't the same as growth, and growth is what creates real, lasting peace. She gestured again, and the hologram showed Elena's 3 worlds working together, sharing resources and knowledge, creating beauty and solving problems collectively. This is what I'm offering. Not human dominance, but human partnership. Not replacing your old ways, but adding new possibilities to them. Chancellor Zix stood up again, his crystalline form flickering with agitation. Pretty words, but how do we know humans won't become aggressive as they grow more powerful? How do we know this cooperation isn't just a mask for conquest? Elena smiled. Because you can watch us, judge us by our actions, not your fears. Give humanity a chance to prove itself, and if we fail, then remove us from the Galactic Council. But if we succeed, imagine what we might accomplish together. The vote that followed was closer than Elena had expected. Species after species stood to announce their decision. Some voted against humanity, still convinced that Earth was too young and unpredictable. But others had been moved by Elena's presentation and the evidence of successful cooperation. The turning point came when Chancellor Zix himself stood up. Elena held her breath, expecting him to deliver the final blow against humanity's galactic membership. Instead, he said something that shocked everyone in the hall. The Vorthan Empire changes its vote to support human membership in the Galactic Council. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Elena stared at the crystalline leader in amazement. Why? She asked. Chancellor Zix's form flickered with what Elena had learned to recognize as amusement. Because in all my centuries of life, I have never seen a species voluntarily share power with their former enemies. That kind of wisdom is rare, regardless of age. The final vote was unanimous. Humanity would join the Galactic Council, and Elena would retain her inheritance and her seat among the galaxy's leaders. But the best moment came after the formal ceremonies ended. The 3 princesses approached Elena with broad smiles and something Elena had never expected to see: official documents. What are these? Elena asked. our request to serve as permanent ambassadors to Earth. Raleigh said, if you'll have us, we want to help build bridges between our civilizations. Quinara added, and honestly, we've gotten used to having you. Brown and Vexandra grinned. Besides, someone needs to keep you out of trouble. Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes. Of course I'll have you. I can't imagine doing any of this without you. 1 year later, Elena stood in her expanded laboratory on Earth, which now housed the largest interspecies research facility in the galaxy. Human scientists worked alongside beings from dozens of different worlds, sharing knowledge and creating wonders that neither species could have imagined alone. The three princesses had kept their promise, serving as ambassadors and becoming some of Earth's most beloved residents. Raleigh had established a school for interspecies diplomacy. Vexandra had created a cultural exchange program that was spreading throughout the galaxy. And Quinara had become Elena's co-director of research, constantly amazed by human creativity and constantly amazing humans with Zephyrian wisdom. As Elena watched her human and alien colleagues working together, she thought about the scared young scientist who had first decoded that mysterious signal. That person seemed like a lifetime ago. Her computer chimed with an incoming message, and Elena smiled as she recognized the sender. It was from Princess Zarthea's estate. But the message wasn't about inheritance or legal matters. It was a personal recording that had been programmed to activate 1 year. After Elena had proven her worthiness, Princess Zarthea's image appeared, smiling warmly. If you're watching this, my dear Elena, then you have exceeded even my highest expectations. I chose you not because I knew you would succeed, but because I believe you had the potential to succeed. The difference between knowing and believing is faith, and faith is the rarest treasure in the universe. The recording paused, and Elena felt as if the late princess was looking directly at her.